So, today's video is the commentary of my carving of a snake. You will notice that there's already quite a bit that was carved before I started of the edited version. That's simply because I had forgotten to hit record until I had done a corner or two. But you haven't missed much. So the first step here was to try to make a rough cylinder that I would then be able to make a release. The chip carving the relief on of the snake, the overlay of the snake on top of it. I should probably look up terminology for wood carving to stop being this indecisive about what words to use on depending on what I was making for this project. And then after the cylinder, I'm tracing the shape I want the snake to have, its body. I waffle a bit around doing this. I wasn't satisfied with my first lines I made. It felt like the head was too close to a portion of the body, so I retraced that section so that there would be a more reasonable gap between the head and the body. And then here I'm basically using a knife to go as deep within the wood and make a bunch of lines so that when I would then try to remove that portion of wood, the wood would be weakened and would be removed in pre-planned chips within which with which it was hard to it was possible to slip and remove too much wood, but it was harder and less likely than although it would otherwise be with any other technique I tried so far. One of the difficulties with this project was the tip of the tail. Uh, I was never quite satisfied with how whenever I would remove wood near the tail, it would be, well, I would always think, well, have I removed the tip? Is the tip further than it was before now? So the exact position of the tip of the tail will change quite a few times within here, and you can often see me try to sharpen the tip and go back and move again some wood. I think in the edited version I removed some of that indecision, but there really was a lot of that. It was fun doing this project. I ended up being in a fairly zen zone for most of the project. With I was able to remove big sections of wood, well, relatively speaking, in a fairly short time, and I felt like the shape was coming along well from the beginning, which is not something that's possible with all projects. But so far, two of my favorite projects to attempt were the ones I made on cylinders like this. So that might be something to look to make more often. The problem there is simply inspiration. I don't have many ideas for cylindrical things, cylindrical projects. So I might have to look into that a bit if I want to do more of them, because I really liked the two I made so far. The one where I did the climbing vines and this one with the snake. They feel a bit more freeform and less strict in a way. This one more, the snake more so than the vines. The vines I really didn't plan at all. The snake, since it was something that could be recognized that it needed to be a specific shape, it was a lot more controlled than what I did with the vines. But it still was a the exact position of the snake within on the stick wasn't important, so I could draw really how I felt looked best, and then stick to that drawing for basically the whole time. So all of the reflection, all of the thinking needed to be done before anything else happened, which made it so that when I started, I didn't need to stop. I didn't need to reconsider at all. Most of the projects I made, because I needed to go back and look at reference, okay, so what's the next step? I had to think a lot about the next step on the projects, what the legs would, thinking about leaving room for X, Y, and Z details and so on and so forth. And here, since I mostly care only about the surface and in one direction, and the position of it on top is not that important, um, there was a lot less thought in the process. The all of thinking was done with the tracing and the planification beforehand, and I didn't need to second guess myself basically at all. A bit later in the detailing, I did go back on the decision I'd made, but other than that, it was a smooth sailing, which is a good motivator to have a project that goes well like this and without much friction. One of the slightly difficult one of the things that I found a bit difficult at that point of the process was trying for the depth of the section I was currently carving to be about the same as the portions that I'd already carved, because it was on the other side of the body of the snake, so it was kind of hard to measure, to gauge by eye, and I didn't really have tools to check, and I nor would ever wanted to use the tools to check. It would have been too much pressure to put on myself for this thing. But because of the way I end up detailing the body, it didn't really matter all that much. But it is something to keep in mind when planning a project. The whether or not the different portions of the project need to be at the exact same depth or not. Here I ended up deciding that it was not important, but it is something to keep in mind. And now I think yes, this is around the head. Yeah. It's kind of hard to see. The lines I traced first with knives are kind of thin, so it's a bit hard to say at times. One other thing I'm considering with this piece, now that it's finished, is how I want to display it. Because, well, I made it and I'm currently placing it so that the stick is going up and that the snake is like climbing it. But I feel like it would look really good horizontal, but I don't really know how I would mount it. I'm thinking maybe nail it to the side of a bookshelf or something, or like through the center of the block of wood with a small nail, so that the so-called stick becomes a branch of that bookshelf or something, and then the snake is just laying or resting on the branch, which feels closer to the mood of the final product. It doesn't look like the snake is particularly moving much, which would be the case if it was climbing. It's more resting, I think. So, but I don't really want to try nailing it if I'm not certain that I want it on that bookshelf or that section of my home. So, I'm just right now I'm just going to be keeping that in mind and thinking of places where I would maybe want it to be, and we'll see. Well, not you, I'll see. The most intense detailing I had to do with a knife on this project was the tongue. The tongue really, it was too thin. In fact, well, no, it was basically the correct size for the type, the shape of the I'd given the snake, but it was the prongs of the tongue were a bit too small, so they felt weak and it felt risky to work around them like they would break at any moment. It ended up not being a problem. I didn't break the tongue at all, but it was, I'd say, the most stressful portion of carving this snake. And after the fact, I noticed that I'd drawn the tongue not center at all, just to the side, which made the little snake look slightly derpy. It's not an issue. It's not something I'm worried about. It's not what I intended it to be, so it is a mistake, but it's not a big mistake, and it's not really something I care about. For snakes can be goofy too, so I'm fine with it as it is. At this point, I'm trying to round off the edge of the body of the snake so that it's not just a sheer cliff. And while I'm doing this, I realize that the depth at which I've carved the body of the snake is large enough that I can carefully remove a portion of wood at the at the joint between the snake and the stick, so that it's more separate. It's not as fluid of a change between the snake and the stick. It's more a bigger, more dramatic split. Um, all of this portion of detailing I do with a small chisel, because I found when trying to do detail, the way to apply force with a chisel is gives more control than the lever that needs to be used to use a knife. Like for the chisel, I'm just pushing in one direction and that's it. With a knife, I'm forcing in multiple directions with with a very big amount of leverage that is hard to control when doing detail. So that's why I'm using chisels for details. So here I'm starting to remove the link between the body and the stick. I don't go all the way. I don't make the snake is not loose on the stick. It's not even close. But at first glance, it looks a bit separate, and it really adds a lot of. It makes the snake look a lot better. Even before I start detailing the scales with the wood burning kit. Um, at that point, I would already once I'd finished doing the the whole way around, I would already have been fairly satisfied with how the snake had turned out. But I had set out to detail the scales with the wood burning kit, so I do that. In fact, when editing, I noticed that not half, but kind of close to half of my whole stream for this piece was the detailing with the wood burning kit. Detailing the making the scales for the whole body was a long process, and so once we're at that point of the video, uh, the time lapse will get faster. Uh, just so that the video is not needlessly long. Like you'll see the basically the whole process of doing the detailing with the scales, but much faster than I usually do the things. Doing this split with the stick and the snake Also gave the stick a bit more of an interesting shape. Uh, like it's more of a twisted, nutty kind of branch more than just a straight stick. It's a more fun design to look at, I think. Well, I say design as if the shape of the stick was the important thing I'd focused on, but it's just it looks better. It looks more complete. It wasn't the main intent of this step, but it did have a good impact also on the stick, even if I wasn't focusing mostly on the snake. That's what I was trying to say. Doing this step did make the step of making the scales a bit more complex because it was hard to reach into the groove um, with the tip of the stylus without uh, the heating element touching the other portions of the body of the snake. It was kind of an awkward angle to get at. It was doable. It was not an impossibility, but it was something that I had to keep in mind a lot when doing the wood burning. And it was harder. Well, it would always have been hard to make a straight line on the curved body, but because the curve also went inwards after the top of the body, uh, it did make it significantly harder, I think, than it otherwise would have been without the step. Not that I would not have done this step had I known beforehand. This step feels essential now that I've done it. It feels right. But the point of the commentary is to critique and try to find different ways to do things, so I do have to say things that might sound a bit harsh towards myself. I'm not. This is my favorite piece so far. I'm not saying it's bad in any way. I don't want that to be the message that comes across. So here, at first, I was going to do just the body and a bit of the neck and a joint with the head with the scales. Uh, I end up going back and doing the rest of the head. I'd skipped most of the head because I wanted the eyes to stand out, and the shape of the scales for the head of a snake is quite complex compared to just the crisscrossing pattern that is on the rest of the body of the snake. So I kind of didn't want to do it. But eventually, while I'm almost halfway through the body of the snake, I realized that it just doesn't look good to not have the snake head complete with the scales pattern on top. It just looked strange. It looked empty, void, and kind of weird without that. So I do go back and add all of the scales on the head while with a reference on my phone to make sure I'm as close to reality as possible, even with the strange pattern of the head scales. But it all turned out really well in the end. I initially wanted to start doing the wood burning and then with on the trace line, and then finish the rest with following the pattern already burned without needing to trace. But when I was at the point where I needed to improvise, it just felt strange, and I didn't like improvising with the wood burning kit. So I ended up still drawing all of the scales beforehand. Even if I didn't follow the lines truly all the way around, there are places where I cheated, where I found after having burnt around a spot that, well, there needs to be one more line there or something like that. The fact that there were lines was something that made all of the process a lot faster and more. All of my movements with the wood burning styles was a lot more confident because I'd done their traces, even if I didn't follow them all exactly to the letter. And given the fact that I was kind of not throwing the lines carelessly, but I was not putting a lot of efforts into the pattern when doing the initial pass with a pencil. So the loss of time spent tracing, I think, is more than caught up by the increased confidence and speed when using the wood burning stylus, because it's just not a comparison. Here, I try to rework the shape of the tail a bit. I end up breaking a bit more than I wanted, so I just sharpen it back up and go back to tracing the lines. The tail was too long for me, so that's why I was working it, and I wanted to try to separate it the same way I did done with the rest of the body, but it was too thin and breakable, so I didn't end up being able to make the same gouge with the tail portion of the snake. So I ended up just sharpening it quickly so that it's basically the correct shape, a good enough one, and finished tracing the scales for most of the body of the snake. Here you see me rotate a lot the block. Like for each line that was crisscrossing, it was easier whenever I went. It was the time to do the indent. It was a lot easier to just spin the wood around so that I'm placing the stylus from above on the line than it would be from below, because then I was able to look at the line as I'm burning over it, which of course when from below I could have looked, but I think I was afraid is not the right word, but I was worried about poking the stick with the stylus when I was not looking, which would have made small burn marks, which wouldn't have been the end of the world. But with the drawing of scales being really a work meant for contrast, the fact that there would be no burns at all on the stick was kind of important to me. Not the end of the world if I made a few mistakes, but I really wanted to avoid any slippage with the wood burning stylus. Even if we forget about the fact that it would have been incredibly dangerous and I could have burned myself quite badly if I had gone too fast and slipped with the wood burner. Even if we forget that, it would have been a problem if I just didn't see what I was doing. So this is why I'm rotating the block a lot in this portion. All of the section with the wood burning stylus is at 5 times speed. Most of the video is at twice the speed. That's basically my standard speed for wood carving because that's the speed that looks good in general. But with wood burning, I was moving so slowly because, well, that's the methodology. The way these tools are used is slowly and methodically. So even 5 times speed looks quite good there. So I could afford to show a lot, even while remaining with near the 30-minute marks, because I don't want the video. It would be hard to record for more than 30-ish minutes, because even right now with a bit a slightly bit more than 30 minutes, I think it's still there are still large spots of silence within the video, which are not ideal. So if I had the exact same amount of stuff to say, but in 40 minutes, that would be a lot worse. So I try to limit myself that way. And the final scales are on the tip of the tail are more tiny circles, and they are crisscross because there's just no more room for crisscrosses. So just tiny circles. And here I do the head. I decided to do the head because of, like I said earlier, it not looking complete. And here I think I'm going to stop talking because the head wasn't a long process, and the video will end just after that with the final look at how it ended up. So I'm going to say thank you for watching, and feel free to come back whenever you want. I'm going to be continuing to release videos to stream at least once a week. Not necessarily with burning. Well, I'm going to stop talking now. Goodbye.